Hello, this is Pastor Rick, and I want to welcome you to the Sunday Forum. In preparation for our discussion on Sunday, September the 21st, we're taking on a sad topic. Political violence in the United States. What comes next? We first want to go over what has happened recently. However, that's part of a larger story, isn't it? That Charlie Kirk was assassinated on September the 10th at Utah Valley University. And this is part of a lot of political and social violence that we're experiencing now each and every week. His killer was Tyler Robinson. It's come out that he is Mormon, grew up in a Republican family, kind of a normal kid, smart, one of the smartest in his class. Only went to the university, however, for a semester, dropped out, was in technical school as an electrician, possibly had a girlfriend who was trans, where this information is just coming out this week as we film. But here it is. And not only was his death happened, but others happened on the same day as well. What has happened in response is that some on the right have called for civil war, for violence, for fighting back. Pretty extreme. On the left, you hear those calling out karma, that he deserved this, and not, well, celebrating his death, rather mourning his assassination. So we have extremists on all sides, but it seems to be leading to this conversation about what should be our response to political violence. There seems to be a wave of this violence and pretty extreme rhetoric in response. And as Christians now, how are we to respond, not just to Charlie Kirk's assassination, tragic as it was, but for all the pressures that are around us now to act in the extreme and not to act as Christians and as followers of Jesus, who called us to be peacemakers. So let's just go over some of the information first, and then I will give a suggestion on some points that we might practice here locally as peacemakers. First of all, Charlie Kirk, he was assassinated, and he was assassinated alongside another school shooting in Colorado. So most of the commentators have called it a political assassination. We could also call it just another school shooting. That doesn't lessen the tragedy of it. Charlie Kirk was talented, but he was provocative. He was an influencer, meaning influencing public opinion, especially among college students. He really gave arguments for the MAGA agenda in support of President Trump. He was considered a white nationalist. He argued for policies which would have supported Christian nationalism, although he always rejected that title. He was against Islam, DEI, third world people coming to the United States through migration. He advocated for free speech and for open gun use. And so, all right, he was controversial. He tried to cross the line many times to be a provocateur, because that's how you play the role as an influencer nowadays with social media. However, instead of mourning the loss, I think you should say no tragedy goes without someone trying to exploit it. So we do have people from the left and the right, some really disparaging him quite openly, and saying he deserved what he got. And others then calling for civil war. I mean, pretty prominent figures like Elon Musk and Steve Bannon calling openly, saying we've had enough is enough. We now have to defend ourselves in this very violent time. Blaming violence usually on one side or the other. And yet when we see how violence has broken out, we can see that, oh my goodness, we are a violent culture. There are over 309 mass murders, gun violence that broke out this year already as of August the 31st, 309 public shootings. And that doesn't include Charlie Kirk's. 302 have been killed, 1,354 have been wounded. These are all tragedies. It just shows you we have a violent culture, and often then this is exploited by certain people. And I guess this is sort of a warning, I guess, but I wish the violence would decrease. You'd think we've come to the edge, and we'd see as a culture we've come to the edge, but it seems like media structure encourages violence. Social media, if you want clicks, you've got to up your rhetoric. If you want attention, you have to sharpen your critique against others, and that leads to extremism. But I think our political culture encourages it as well. If a politician wants to be seen, wants to be heard in this attention culture that we have, to gain attention, you just got to go over the top. And often that means extremist language. And let's face it, we know mental stress is up and guns are everywhere. And when you put mental stress and guns together, you're going to get Tyler Robinsons. In fact, we know, especially among men, young men, this is a problem. They're often lonely, they're isolated, they're playing video games at home, they've not been socialized in the community, they're not in church. And this often leads to a certain radicalization and violence breaking out. Not necessarily political violence, just violence. We remember that the person who shot at Reagan, President Reagan, was trying to attract Jodie Foster, as if that would work. But that was what he was trying to do. Not a political act, although a political act. It was an act of a desperate man looking for love in all the wrong ways and all the wrong ways. Other thing we have to say is that Christian nationalism, that is recognized by most churches as a heresy, and it's quite violent. It's built on the strategy and the ideology of the 7 Mountain Mandate. The Christians should now take over the country, and we as Christians should be leading government, media, entertainment, education, religion, family, and the arts. And so this is an active strategy. Again, the Charlie Cook push, but many evangelicals push as well. This is out there, and it's one that's associated with power. And there they are often calling for war, even if it's a soft civil war, to gain power over these 7 mountains. And finally, I want to say again, youth culture is difficult now. People are struggling, especially young men. And so this is even a call for you as parents or grandparents, if you've got young men in your family who you see are lonely and who are pulling back from family and from friends and from school, that's a red flag. And it's not just your duty to engage them, it's all of our duties to keep our young men in particular, but young people in our minds and our hearts, and to keep them engaged. All right, so that's a prediction that political violence will probably increase. Now, what's the answer? Okay, how do we respond as we hear these upsetting newsreels? And we sit in our homes and we can be terribly frightened. And there we have to hear Jesus speak to us, fear not, to trust in the Lord, and to come up with a plan of prayer, but also a prayer of action. I'm hopeful that some of the answers in the future are going to percolate up from the bottom, rather right now coming from the top. Although I'm encouraged by some politicians who I think have really taken the lead to bring us together, many others have not. And so here are 7 suggestions of how we might try to lower the temperature here at Emmanuel and in your community and in your family. And the first is, be a fireman. All right, run around with a water hose and lower the temperature in your family, in your house, and among your friends. Because we know friends will come to us and they'll use pretty hot rhetoric, either from the right or the left. And how could you be a peacemaker? How could you be a fireman to put out some of those flames? You know, And here I critique Charlie Kirk. When George Floyd was murdered by the policeman in Minnesota, afterwards, he did not mourn his death. He called him a scumbag. When Pelosi's husband was attacked in his home, he made fun of him and mocked him. That seems to be, and that's not just a problem with Charlie Kirk, that's a problem on both sides, right and left, that instead of being human and identifying with tragedy, we mock it or we celebrate it. And so by being a fireman, we're able to be more human and recognize that no matter if we disagree with someone politically, no one deserves to be shot for expressing their opinions. And we have that also with Melissa and Mark Hortman, the legislators in Minnesota who were shot on the right. We had Scalise shot on the left, and of course, President Trump almost killed, attacked twice by gunmen. So we've got a lot, we've got a lot of violence out there. Let's be firemen. Secondly, I will learn and practice civil discourse. Now, you know we practice this with our 7 principles of civil discourse and spiritual discernment here at Emmanuel. But I'm suggesting we learn again how to engage other people, especially those who disagree with us, in civil discourse, which means we're having fellowship with someone who has different political or religious opinions. And we learn how to do this. And it doesn't have to be our 7 rules here at Emmanuel. You can just have your own rules. Now, one of the things I really praise about Charlie Kirk was his ability and conviction to go on college campuses to engage students in open debate, especially the open debate at Oxford University. Take a look at those videos, because at Oxford, he engaged not the student body, but the debate teams. So here were students, you might say his equals, those who were smart, they were trained in debate, and there were rules for the debate back and forth. And those are quite dynamic. And so, however we do that, civil discourse, rules for the road and how we discuss things, we need those for our families, for our communities, and yeah, for our church. We don't do this well. We have to learn how to do this much better. Third, be a boxer. Be engaged politically. We can get in some good political fights. Be a boxer, but don't punch below the belt. There are rules to engagement, and it's kind of like the NFL. We want a tough sport. We want hard hitting, but you have to abide by the rules. Otherwise, all of our favorite players are getting hurt all the time with cheap blocks, cheap tricks, and brutality. So we want a hard game, but we want a fair game. And so that's the boxer analogy. It's not pull out of politics. No, go into politics. Be a boxer. Just don't hit below the belt. Fourth, words matter. Words matter. But so too do ideas matter, and relationships matter. Now, we all know that. Words, the Bible, especially in Proverbs, encourages us, and the book of James, to watch our words because they're like nuclear weapons. It's hard to take back words once we've spoken them. And when certain people are speaking violently, the Bible says stay away from them. Stay away from the foolish man who will only trap you in his bad speech. I would also say a bad idea is this 7 mountain mandate for Christians to then dominate all these 7 aspects of culture. That is not something that Christians should attach themselves to. This is not the message of Jesus, just the opposite. And Christian nationalism falls into this power grab, which is exactly the opposite approach of Jesus. Remember, the Jews wanted him. His followers wanted him to be the Messiah, to throw out the Romans, to take control of society. And he said, no, I'm a different type of Savior. I'm a different type of Messiah. I'm going to die to save for the sins. And I should also mention relationships matter. We've already mentioned, especially young men, but all young people. But also when you get older, relationships matter. Feeling a part of the community, and we want people to feel a part even when we disagree with them. Fifth, let's celebrate our commonalities with fireworks, but identify our difference with humility. And we're used to doing just the opposite. You know, most of our TV shows, newscasts, the stuff we watch online heightens our differences instead of celebrating our commonalities. And so in your family, even, you know, with married couples, how do you celebrate the things you have in common? And then, yes, we have our convictions, have them, but also hold them lightly with silk gloves, with humility. You know, that person in our lives who disagree with us, they might have something to share that we need to learn. That's what spiritual discernment's all about. Finally, we want to follow Jesus as the Prince of Peace. He says, blessed are the peacemakers. So let's strive for that blessing. I want that blessing that comes when I follow Jesus and I follow his lead as the Prince of Peace. We can't be the ones leading divisions in our community if we're following Jesus as the Prince of Peace. And finally, let's pass the peace as a subversive activity. You know, in church, after the sermon, we pass the peace. The peace of the Lord be with you. Which means before we go to communion, we want to establish peace in our own community. We can't go to communion and receive all the blessings of Jesus if we don't first connect as community. What a wonderful symbolic act. So let's pass the peace, but not just on Sundays. Let's pass the peace with our neighbors and those who disagree with us politically from Monday through Saturday. And so again, what can we do to lower the temperature and play the role locally? Let's be a fireman. Also, learn and practice civil discourse. Be a boxer, just don't hit below the belt. Remember, words matter, ideas matter, oh boy, and relationships matter. Celebrate commonalities with fireworks and identify differences with humility. Follow Jesus as the Prince of Peace and pass the peace, not just on Sundays, but all during the week. Christians are playing a major role in heightening violence in our country. Sad for me to say, but it's true. And therefore, we need to call Christians now also to play the major role as peacemakers, following Jesus and showing our culture what it means to pass the peace. Thanks for joining us for this Sunday Forum. Join us on Sunday, 10:15, for the discussion after worship. Bye-bye now.